but you may not necessarily know how to make them better, because you can be called and not have the experience or the exposure to know what to do, to know the strategy. Like one of the most like eye-opening experiences I've ever had in my life was sitting down at this really nice restaurant in Atlanta. And I was having, I call this like a me and Jesus brunch, to where I'm just eating by myself, having like a peaceful moment, treating myself to like a nice, I think it was a lunch. It was like a Sunday or Saturday, maybe lunch or brunch scenario. And this is a time where I'm like, look, I was reading a book and just kind of enjoying and just being at peace, right? And I think that's important because everyone needs to know how to be alone and how to enjoy their own company. And so there's a table next to me, and at the table was a father and a son. Um, yeah, exact. That's exactly what it's like. He says, y'all, it's like a door, and you know your blessings are behind the door, but you can't unlock it, but you know it's there. That's exactly what it's like. That's why we need more people who are called to actually show up. Because there's a lot of people who are called that they just never showed up for work. They were meant to be the ones to usher other people into the promised land. They just never showed up for work. Right? That's why, and I want to make sure that none of you guys are those people. And I declare that right now. None of y'all are going to be the people who were called but never showed up to work. So you have people standing behind a blessing door like, I'm supposed to open it. I ain't got the password. Open Sesame did not work. And so, but one of the ways that I experienced this is I'm sitting next to this guy and his son, and his father was right. Right, but they be sitting there with the keys and they just be like, but we've all been there too. Any of y'all know you have the answer to someone, but you be like, I ain't got time, just mind my business. And sometimes that is the answer. And so the guy is sitting there with his son, and literally he is hammering his son about the state of his finances. Hold on. I think I got stuck for a second. No. Not you did that, TikTok. My bad, y'all. For some reason it went crazy. Let me see if y'all here. All right. There we go. It went crazy for a second. So the guy, he's sitting there hammering his son about his finances. He's talking to him like, well, how much money do you have saved? How much do you have in stocks? And the guy's like, well, I did this. How much money did you make last week? How much, blah, 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 right? And so the son is going in and in and in about what's happening. And then the dad was like, yeah, and I'm also concerned about, now listen to this. Listen to this. The father was like, I'm very concerned with how much money you have invested in crypto. Blah, 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 blah. Yes, it's new. Yes, you can make money, but we need hard cash. Da, 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 da. And so I'm sitting there, and at first, I could see that the son is irritated, but I said, this is actually what's supposed to happen. He's making sure, and he's being accountable to ensure that his son was making sound financial decisions, and he's holding him accountable to that. I said, that's how you maintain generational wealth. And he makes sure that his children has the information that they need to succeed, because it's not necessarily the fact that someone doesn't have the will or they don't want to. A lot of times they don't have the strategy, and when you're not exposed to the strategy and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, right, then you end up getting lost. That's why in the Bible, God says, make sure you teach this to your kids, so that your kids, and your children's children will know me, right? Because if you don't teach it to them, they absolutely will not know. And then you'll have a lost generation. Right. So that's why I do things like this, because I find that a lot of times we categorize people as being stupid or as being ignorant or as being, what's the word? Low class. I mean, we judge people in a lot of different ways, right? And I just don't, and when they grow old, they won't forget. Exactly. Teach them the way to go. Exactly. And so sometimes we judge people, but what we don't look at is the lack of information. People make decisions based upon the best information that they have at the time. Even when sometimes people offend me, I'm saying, I don't take it personally because I'm saying to myself, they're acting like that most likely because they haven't learned better yet. Life doesn't have as many sociopaths as we think that there are. Now, are there some sociopaths out there who know better and just will not do better? Absolutely. There are those people, right? But there's a lot fewer of them than what we think. A lot fewer of them than what we think. Most people want to do better, right? They just don't have the information. A lot of people don't realize that the behavior that they're demonstrating is toxic. Why? Because they've been ingesting toxic water their entire lives. So to them, this is just another walk in the park. This is another walk in the park. This is nothing about this is uncomfortable because they were born, bred, and raised in dysfunction, or just function based upon, where they're at the time. One of the things that I'm writing this in my book is getting to a place of forgiveness, recognizing that your parents can only give you what they have. Your parents can only give you what they have. If they don't have it, they cannot give it to you. And that is really, really hard to come. It's really hard to get to that conclusion in that place because we get this mindset because we think that our parents are supposed to have and be everything. And they can only be who they are up until the point in which they're raising you. How many of y'all have seen your parents get better, as you were grown, and you see them get a lot better in their older age? That's why I think sometimes we get resentful when we see how great our parents are with their grandkids, right? And we're like, well, you didn't do that with me. Oh, you weren't gentle parenting. You weren't doing all this. And it's just because they just grew as people. But when they had us, they weren't at that place yet. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with us. So I'm also called to people who are, we said settling for less. Maybe you feel lost. Maybe you feel frustrated. Maybe you feel hungry. A lot of times people who feel left behind, exactly. A lot of times people who feel left behind, maybe you feel like you've been a victim to your circumstances. Maybe you feel like you should be further along than what you are. I hear that all the time. And I used to say that, like, man, my life, I really should be way further than this. No, when you learn that you're exactly where you're supposed to be based upon the strategies, all right, and your mindset, the strategies that you've been applying and the mindsets that you've been in, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Sometimes it could be where you just get like extreme dissatisfaction, right? Now, here's the thing, is that this is something that is more sneaky. Like I said, I've been coaching for maybe close to 15 years now. And when I first started in business, we had some social media, but not a lot. And so we were still kind of like, we had like MySpace, and I think Instagram was kind of just, no, when I first started business, it was Facebook was a thing. MySpace was a thing. Look at me aging myself. MySpace was a thing. We used to read blogs all the time. And I think we had Twitter, but it wasn't what it was today. And so when you would work with someone, there were fewer methods of escapism. Meaning, like, you couldn't just be really depressed and sit in bed rot forever, because there wasn't really that much for you to take in to keep you constantly entertained. Like, you could get on TikTok and lay in bed for 3 days and never run out of content, right? Because it never goes off. It just continues. You can get on YouTube, right? And there's so many different videos to where there's all these like methods of escapism, Netflix, all these things to where you can literally just take in information and not really get bored for a while. And so a lot of times people don't necessarily recognize immediately that they're very dissatisfied with their results. It's not until you start pulling back the layers of escapism, or those things are no longer available, or they just get something just clicks to where they realize, okay, this is not going somewhere. But the biggest thing is, maybe you feel lost and things can get better. But what's most important is understanding that things absolutely can and will get better if you use the right strategies. So one of the things that I am talking about right now is just the early layers and taking people through the initial processes that I would take someone through in order to help them improve. And the first thing is, one, for them to really be able to identify what it is that they want. And the reason I do that is, without a vision, the people perish. Without a vision, they cast off restraint. We see it all the time in life. All the time in life, right? It's like if you never see yourself being great, you never see yourself building an empire or whatever, you won't even recognize why it's probably not a great idea for you to have 12 kids with 12 different women. Why? Because you don't have any plans anyway. But when you plan on making millions and millions and millions, right? You're like, you know what I don't want to do? I don't want to have I cannot have $60,000 a month child support bill to 12 different women, to where I'm working hard to make millions and I can keep none of it. That's how I know for certain. Some of it is just casting off restraint. But when you don't think ahead, you don't think about like, man, I achieved my dream, but I can't live out the fruit of my dream. If I went to the NFL, I got into the NBA, I can't even live off the fruit of it because I cast off restraint back in the day. And now I'm just working. He said, stop talking about me. It's okay. Because, God is a redeemer, right? But, because I cast off restraint then, and I didn't see that I was going to be this millionaire, I made decisions there that's going to cost me all the fruit of my work, of my gift, right? I don't think any of them start that and say, you know what? They just see, this is a pretty girl. They're not thinking, man, I'm going to make millions one day. Like this is going to sustain. They're thinking, well, what if this is my only season? But you didn't realize you're going to be in there for several seasons and you're going to make millions of dollars and only be able to keep a small percentage of it because most of it ended up going towards child support. So that's one of the first, whatever you said, I think TikTok just filtered it. So that's the important portion of why you have to start off with a vision. You have to know what you want. You have to know what your gifts are. You got to know where you're going, because without that, you're going to see short-sighted. Now, here's the thing, right? Because I gotta pull it not only from my coach bag, but also from my minister bag, which is the number one sign and the number one thing that the enemy will try to do is to make you make short-sighted decisions. Make you trade in your destiny for something that you like right now. Good evening, Larry. Is it evening? I guess it is evening. It's afternoon. Or maybe you're like Africa or Europe somewhere this evening. So that's how you can always tell. That's the number one sign. If you ever read, the Bible, or you look back at your own life, typically most of your decisions that were negatively influenced were decisions to where you were in a position where you were thinking short-sighted. You were and you traded in portions of your destiny to what feels good right now. That's it. Let's say you want to, desperate. And sometimes it's not out of desperation. Sometimes it just feels good. Like, how many of y'all been on a diet and then you go and, get hamburgers and cookies and stuff like that because you're like, man, this tastes good. But you have a vacation to go on. You may not be desperate, but it just tasted good. It felt good. It's whatever, right? And so that's why discipline is one of the most important character traits to have, because what it shows is that you're willing to trade what feels good right now for what's actually going to suit you in the future. But if you don't take the time to really establish a vision for yourself, or no one makes you sit down and write out your goals, write out a vision, and to get dreamy about where you want your life to go. And I think it's mostly because there's so many people who have just allowed life to happen to them, and they're just like, oh, YOLO, whatever. And they just have very, very little faith. They don't really believe that they're navigating their life, especially people who have developed a victim mentality or people who have been oppressed. Eventually what ends up happening is you stop believing that you can be delivered from that situation. You stop believing that it can even happen. And so what happens is you become short-sighted. You become short-sighted. So you have to write a vision so you have something to look forward to. And so you're always thinking long-term, right? Is this thing going to benefit me in the short term and the long term? So that's the first thing that you want to do. If you guys don't have a vision, you don't know what you want to do with yourself, you don't know what you can or want to do with your life, go to my profile, click the link, download the workbook. And I promise you, it's going to make you develop a vision for the most important areas of your life. What's up, Mr. Marcel? If you guys continue to navigate, or if you are navigating in life without a vision, you will be left behind in the seasons that are coming. Right. You will be left behind. You will suffer greatly. And the beautiful thing is, God is always downloading instructions into our spirit about what we need to do to get to the next level. The problem is we never take the instructions and print them out. We don't look at them. We treat it like IKEA furniture. Be like, I only paid $2 for this anyway, so if it breaks, it just breaks. Right? The instructions are there. We just don't take time to acknowledge them. You know, when you pull up something and here's the instruction booklet, you're like this. And you just start putting stuff together until you realize, like, oh, snap, the whole leg off this table is wrong. And you have to start all over again. That's how life is. We didn't take time to acknowledge the instructions, right? We didn't write them down. We didn't write the vision and make it plain. Life continues to happen. We're just figuring it out as we go. And then we end up with a two-legged table. Or it's just shaking. Everything's shaking. Nothing's stable because we do that. So that's the first thing that you want to do is have a vision. But the second thing is you have to challenge all of the identities. So this weekend or tomorrow from 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm hosting a workshop called Healing Your Identity and Your Self-Image. These are some of the things that I teach to my clients and their employees, because one of my clients is sending all of her employees to this tomorrow, is teaching them how their identity is informing all of their decision making. So sometimes when it comes to developing people, everything's not going to have a do this, do that. Everything's not going to be like, Pat's going to collect $200 and you're going to go here, then you're going to da. Most of the time, it's going to be informed by your decisions. But the quality of your decision making is going to be informed by the quality of your identity. So your identity is how you define yourself. And what happens is people make decisions based upon how they identify. Now, the problem is a lot of how we identify is subconscious, meaning you're not even aware that that's how you identify. We think we're just going through this world and just being us, not recognizing that some of the us's that we're being were already predefined for us. Meaning someone else told us who we were. And so we're going out in the world, interacting with the world based upon definitions that we were never intentional about forming. Now, the problem is when you have a destiny that's inside of you, but you have an identity that is in conflict with that destiny. So these are the little subconscious ways that you define yourself that's in conflict with what it is you actually can achieve or you want to achieve. And sometimes what we do and what I see often is people embrace the identity far more than the destiny, but the destiny is the thing that's actually going to make you happy. Isn't that crazy, y'all? The destiny is the thing that you want. But when people are confronted with the identity and the destiny, a lot of times they throw the destiny out because the identity's been with them for so long. Now, here's like an easy way, and y'all like and share this because I want more people to see this. And if y'all don't like it and you don't share it, TikTok's not going to show it to anybody. And I don't want to gatekeep. So now here's the thing. One of the easiest ways to see and to understand how you've been identifying is ask yourself, whose stories do you identify with? What's up, culinary icon? This is how you know how you've been identifying. I'll give you an example. I tell, like at one point, hello, how are you doing today? I'm doing really good. So at one point I said, look, you got to start identifying more with Mary in the Bible than Mary J. Blige. Mary in the Bible received a miracle, right? And gave birth to a savior. Mary J. Blige's story was, I was your lover and your secretary, working every day. That was about being used and abused. And whenever you identify with those stories, then that let me know, okay, oh, hold on. TikTok, you that ain't nothing but the devil. Hold on 1 second, guys. Lord, protect this live. Resume. Okay. There we go, y'all. It froze up on me. Lord, that ain't nothing but the devil. Because if I was on here just talking about something crazy, it wouldn't ever freeze. So the stories that you identify with the most, right? Thank you so much for liking the live. The stories that you identify the most really shows you how you identify. So, if I were to identify more with Mary J. Blige instead of Mary in the Bible, right? There's nothing wrong with Mary J. Blige. What I'm saying is the idea of being victimized, right? To where for a long time, the stories that resonated was like, oh yeah, was your love it? And you're like, people are out here doing me wrong and you're just bumping it and you feel connected to that story, right? Now, some of it is just good songwriting, or a lot of it is just good songwriting, right? But a lot of it was true. You can tell where your identity is by the stories that you relate to and the identities that you relate to. Now, this is the problem. If I relate so strongly with that story of being a victim, by the time it's time for me to live out my destiny, what I'm portraying is victim. Someone whose destiny is being stolen from them. Someone who's constantly being overlooked, someone who's constantly being used, someone who's constantly doing all of these things. And so when I start interacting with the world and making decisions, I'm making decisions out of that identity. So I could end up overreacting to things. It could make me paranoid. It could make me latch on to people that are victimizers. Right? Because when you are someone who identifies with constantly being victimized, what ends up happening is you latch onto that. So that's one way of seeing, hey, what are some of these sneaky identities that I've been relating with and has become a part of my identity? Like, yeah, this happened to all of us, that's sneaking into my destiny. What are these things? Like one of the things I talked about earlier when they're like the state of relationships and and I posted this earlier. I said one of the problems that no one wants to talk about is the identities that are being celebrated. Like when you look back at like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, whatever, right? Some of the same identities, like they were completely rejecting the identity of being a hood man or woman, hood life. If anything, they were constantly fighting the systems that were creating projects and hoods. And they were incessantly and consistently rejecting everything associated with that lifestyle. That's when you see them always wearing suits. Everyone being disciplined, everyone being this, that, how they spoke, how they acted, how they conducted themselves. Everything was in rejection to the life that the system was creating. So what ends up happening? Instead of just being overtly like, hey, we're going to create this system to make sure that this hood life is sustained and kill you from the outside, what we're going to do is promote it to where you embrace this lifestyle. How can we feed you this lifestyle to where you embrace this identity. Because if I can get you to embrace this identity, I can also get you to act out of this identity. Although it's the same oppression, but instead of the oppression coming from externally, now the oppression is coming internally. And not only am I going to get you to embrace it, I'm going to get you to promote it, right? I'm going to get you to value it. I'm going to get you to put it on a pedestal, right? And I'm going to continue, and then I'm going to help you make it big. I'm going to use sociopaths to promote it and make it to where it is like where people can taste it, right? We're gonna market it in a way to where it seems like the thing to do. It says, however, everyone's not about conformity anymore. It's all about fitting in, right? But the thing is that what are they fitting in? So that is an example of how your identity influences everything. So if you're embracing identities that's in conflict with the destiny that you want to have, there's nothing that can be done, because your decision making is always going to be informed by how you identify. Period. And we have to challenge any identity that we embrace that's in conflict with the destiny that we have and what it is that we want to achieve. Now, what I want you guys to do is think back and think about what are some of the identities you've embraced and how has that impacted your decision making. Some of y'all may be like, well, shoot, I know for men, it's been like this whole boys will be boys, or sometimes we'll say like, oh, he got all these girlfriends. My son's gonna have all these girlfriends, whatever. Then he gets older, and guess what he does? He gets a lot of girlfriends. Thank you so much for the gift. God bless you. Next thing you know, he gets all these girlfriends. Next thing you know, he got all these kids. Next thing you know, half his income is in child support. Next thing you know, and it just, and not recognizing that identity was formed and embraced and valued 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And the identity came into direct conflict with the actual destiny that person was supposed to have, right? So this is why you have to go back and heal your identities and reform and restore your identities to an identity that is consistent with what it is you're trying to do. And so that's what this Saturday session is about. It's from 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to show you guys how to do it from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And so, and it's going to be powerful because I'm going to show you guys exactly what to do. Now, the reason this is so important is your identity is oftentimes a reflection of what you've brought in, what's been brought into your subconscious. So many people, now I'm reading things that demonstrate how powerful our subconscious is. And one of the scariest but most beautiful things, right? Like just like every tool, if you use it the right way, it can either be amazing or it can be extremely dangerous. One of the things about our subconscious is that our subconscious has no filter. It has absolutely no filter. Thank you so much for sharing. It has absolutely no filter. So whatever it takes in, it accepts as true. Whatever it is. So let's say someone, a long time ago was like, thank you, Mr. Diggs. I appreciate it. So one of the things about it, and this is why he's talking about the Lord, right? This is why it's so important and why over and over in the Bible, it says, renew your mind. I remember one time I was in prayer. I said, God, what are my directions? What do you want me to do? And one of the ways that God talks to me is I'll pray and then I'll close my eyes and I'll see a scripture. It may say like 1 Corinthians chapter 7 or something like that, right? And I just open my eyes, I'll turn to it. So in this particular time, one of the first things that I saw, I can't remember the exact, or maybe it was 1 Corinthians chapter 7, but when I got to it, now I want to check, Lord, was that you? But when I got to it, the scripture was about renewing your mind. And it was about renewing your mind. And that was my direction. That's why it's so important, because your mind, right, is just a reflection of your soul, your mind, will, and your emotions, and everything flows from that. So when you have your subconscious is taking in all of this information slowly but surely, right? Slowly but surely, you're taking on mindsets and identities that you're unaware of because there's no filter. I posted a video yesterday about this guy doing parkour somewhere in Europe, right? And he's jumping off of parking decks onto like lightning poles and going into this and doing that. And these people who do this, they don't have a helmet on. They're jumping off of bridges. They're doing some crazy, crazy things. And I said, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. At some point, they stop identifying with regular human and they start saying, I'm Spider-Man. And they are literally making decisions based upon that and succeeding in that and have said it to themselves over and over and over again to where now they've got all these cool videos where they're doing it. Now, obviously, we don't get to see whether they broke a leg a few times or whatever, but with the things that you see them do, at some point they said, I'm Spider-Man. I'm Spider-Man. Or if you see like these martial artists that like do all these crazy kicks in the air and they run and they flip 12 times, they do all this other stuff. That is the result of changing your mindset and deciding what you're going to be and allowing the body to catch up with what it's been receiving over and over and over again. That's why, you decree a thing and it shall be established. But the part that I'm talking about that's scary is most of our subconscious never developed past the age of 8. That's the average age of it. And a lot of how we identify are based upon things that we absorbed, images, ideas, thoughts, behaviors we mirrored, and the things that people told us, right? To where it's like, one of the things I had to really challenge myself with was growing up. My father, my mother, my grandparents, all of them had fed me a lot of concepts about what it meant to be Black. And without realizing it, in subtle ways, I was acting out of these definitions. Now, obviously, they didn't mean any harm by it. My grandfather went through, civil rights and everything else. He was born in the 30s. What he'd seen was crazy down in Louisiana, all this other stuff. So he didn't mean any harm by it. But at a certain point, I had to realize, okay, I'm not living their life. So I can't continue to identify the exact same way with the same restrictions because those same restrictions are not there. Now, there are some, but I've got to recreate this and the meaning behind this because now I'm making decisions based upon the identities that I had. My mother gave me this example to where she said when she was a teenager, she really wanted to get into marketing, but she chose not to do that because she said at the time, you didn't see any Black people doing that. And she never heard of it. And people would actually say, well, Black people don't get hired doing that. What she didn't know was that 20 years later, one of my really, really good friends is in marketing. And she has a graduate degree from the Kellogg School of Business or MBA, and she's in marketing in all these huge companies, right? But the decision had really been informed based upon her identity and not necessarily on the reality that God had destined for her. But I'm saying this because we do this all the time. So I'll give you an example that's a little easier to understand. And why this is important. Let me see. Do I have some in here? So I want to give you kind of like a little visual. Hopefully I have something in here that would allow me to give you a visual. Maybe. Perfect. Tic Tacs. Right? So everything that you want to do is inside you like this. It's inside you. Hold on. Boom. It's inside you like this in seed form. Right? Everything that's in your potential. I'm hungry. Is inside of you in seed form like this. Okay? And at some point, you have to water it. You have to water it. Now, once you water it, it has the opportunity to grow into some sort of harvest. Okay. Your identity is what filters the water that comes through. So let's say you have these seeds, but your identity is toxic. You're like, look, I have all this potential, but I think I'm stupid. Someone a long time ago told me that I was disorganized. Someone told me I had a learning disability. Someone said that I have anger issues when really I was frustrated a few times and no one gave me the true answers for it, and no one talked to me and no one guided me, and I had pent up frustration that was coming out in anger. But now I just think I'm an angry person. Maybe someone said, or whatever, right? You embrace somehow, some way, whether subconsciously or consciously, you embrace an identity that's opposite of what was supposed to happen. So now, instead of watering, these seeds with spring water, you're watering them with bleach. What's going to grow from that? Nothing. Or, maybe you have a filter, but the filter's a little old. So maybe you're trying to water it with thoughts, ideas, and concepts from 20 years ago and who you were 20 years ago. You're still the iPhone 1, and your destiny is requiring you to be the iPhone, whatever number we're on now. So it's not that your identity was wrong. It's just out of season. You better speak, Lord. Okay. It's not that the identity was bad. It's just out of season. You're embracing things and mindsets and concepts from 3 seasons ago, and that identity served you 3 seasons ago. But you're trying to water these seeds with something that's out of season. So maybe you did get a filter on your water, but that filter was supposed to be changed out, a million years ago. And now the water's just as dirty as it goes in now, just not because you didn't try to filter it, not because you're not trying, wasn't something that you did intentionally. You're just using a filter that's out of season. Right? And then maybe, you have one to where, you've got a brand new filter. So you did the work, you cleaned up your identity, and now you have these seeds that are being watered by spring water. And when you water the seeds using spring water, now it has the opportunity to harvest. But the thing is that most people don't see, they just see seeds, water. So I know I have this in me, and I'm doing things to try to get this thing out, but you don't realize that you're doing these things with a faulty filter, right? That water that you're putting on there is dirty. It's been contaminated, and you never changed out the filter. You didn't. And you're wondering why things aren't happening. Then frustration goes in to where now you think there must be something wrong with me. Now the filter gets worse, right? And then you start to settle, or you start comparing it to someone else's filter. Because remember, these are your life and your potential. These are seeds that are in you. Everyone doesn't have the same seeds. They don't. I have friends of mine, like one of my good friends is an amazing artist. We don't have the same seeds. Hold on 1 second. This thing is really getting on my nerves. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. So I'll give y'all a second to get back in here. Okay. Sorry. This thing has been going crazy on me. So, so the seeds, this is your potential. And God put different seeds in every person. Everyone has different seeds. Like I have friends of mine that are amazing artists. Like they can draw. They can, like my daughter's an amazing artist. She can draw and she can be like an animator if she wanted to, if that's what she decides to do. She has that type of artistic seed. I don't. Y'all, I don't care how many lessons I take. I might get better, but that's not a seed that I have. And so different types of seeds require different types of watering, right? The same way, like, and think about it like fertilizer. You can't use everything, every single plant isn't fertilized best with the same type of fertilizer. They need different things. So part of the issue is that we do conform and we try to water those seeds with using somebody else's filter. We try to water our gifts the way that someone else who has a completely different set of gifts will try to water their gifts. Or maybe you grew up in a family to where they're like, everyone in this family is like this. And that might have worked for granddaddy, and that might have worked for grandma. Thank you so much, Splash Zone. And that may have worked for so and so, right? And it may have worked with the times, but it doesn't work with the type of seed that you have. I see this a lot in families. Like, you ever see videos of people from families from the Caribbean or whatever, and they're like, African parents are hard, da 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 da. They criticize a lot, they do whatever. That all works until you get a child that's sensitive. That all works until an artist was born in your family, and now the same watering doesn't work on them. It may have worked on the other 6 kids, but on this kids, now they have debilitating anxiety and depression because you try to water them the same exact way that you watered the other ones, or what was culturally how you identify, and you just use it on everything and everyone. That doesn't work very well. It doesn't work very well at all. So these are some of the things to where when I work with someone, I got to really pull their identity out of them. And we have to really do the work to see, okay, these are the decisions you're making based upon how you define yourself and not based on who you really are. This is just who you became or who you've been saying that you are based upon what other people have said. Because here are the different ways that most people form their identity. It's usually based on their past experiences. And like, you know who I am? Do you know what I've been through? You ever hear people say that? Do you know what I've been through? Friend, what you've been through is not your identity. What you've been through was an experience. Good, bad, or indifferent. You are not what you've been through. You are you. And you were walking life the same way that all of us were. And you went through something as a result, but you are not what you've been through. So that's the first way that people tend to form their identity, is based on what they've been through. Right? And I see, and it's really sneaky because in all the different ways that we identify, there's these little sneaky markers that inform what that identity means. Right? Like, I hear people say, I'm a single mom. Well, what does that mean? What does that subconsciously say about you that maybe you're ingesting? Why not just say I'm a mom? Because what if next week you're not going to be a single mom? What if next week your husband shows up, right? So, there's just little things that happen. So that's the first thing. People identify themselves by what they've been through. The second way that people form their identity is what other people have said about them. So it is very dangerous to form an identity based upon other people's opinions, because most of them don't know you well enough to give you any sort of indicator as to who you are. You could be married and be with someone for forever and still 50 years in are figuring out more about who this person is. That's why it's dangerous. And most of the time there are people who are, most of the time there are people who are informing who we are and informing our identities that are just clueless. They're clueless. They don't really know you like that, but they told you who you were and you embraced it subconsciously. Why? Because your subconscious doesn't have a filter. And so when someone says something to you and you're like, oh yeah, I guess that's right, and you just accept it, that goes straight into your subconscious. Now it becomes real, because the subconscious doesn't need for things to actually be real, right? It just needs to receive it. That's why it's important that you don't just come into agreement with everything that someone says about you. And most of the time, we're so insecure in the first place that when people say these things about us, you're like, maybe I am. But you didn't realize they called you ugly because they were jealous and they just need you to feel like how they feel. And so now you got a complex. You're going around thinking you're ugly. Or they told you were stupid. Or they told you, you'll never be anything. Right, when really they were saying these things from their own place of insecurity, and they needed you to be in a place to where you can be more easily controlled, to where you won't really show yourself, because if you really show yourself as who you really are, you'd probably leave them in the dust. So these are some of the things that inform your identity, and however you identify, you are going to make decisions that's consistent with that. That's why we live in this world where there's this big thing of like, it's trans, da 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 da. What you're really seeing is people who have said something to themselves enough, and then they start living out of the reality that they've said to themselves. That's why it's really hard to ever tell someone like that they are something that they've told themselves that they are. Because the subconscious mind, right, it is built to create a reality for us. Whatever you tell yourself all the time, your mind will slowly start to, and your brain will slowly start to reform itself, right? And to point itself in that direction. If you're constantly, like, any of you guys know people that are always saying they're sick and that they feel bad? I don't feel good. And at first it started as just like a way of attention seeking, right? Or maybe they did have a stomach ache. And I'm like, oh, I just feel bad. I want this. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, no. And they say it long enough. Do you know eventually their brains will start to rewire? Their brains will begin to rewire itself, and they will literally send distress signals throughout their body that will make themselves sick. Right? So at a certain point, if they say it over and over again, they're not wrong. They do feel that way. It doesn't mean that they are that way. That's why, when you ever see people have the placebo effect, all the doctor is doing is making them feel as though they've gotten something, so they'll stop thinking that. So they're like, oh, okay, I understand that. You take this. It's going to make you feel better. It's this, oh my gosh, I'm going to take it. It's going to make me feel better. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to feel better. Next thing you know, the brain's like, we're going to feel better. Right? And then suddenly it doesn't hurt anymore. And we've done it with kids and stuff like that. Oh, this hurts so bad. Da, da, da. It's like, okay, let me put a Band-Aid on it. I remember I did that with my youngest daughter when she was a little kid, and she was like, oh, it hurts so bad. And there was literally nothing there. I was like, this Band-Aid's going to make you feel better. And I just went and got a Band-Aid out and just put it on her arm. There was no scar there, no nothing. I put it on her arm, and she stopped. She was like, oh. I do feel better, right? But it's the power of the mind. And so these are some of the soft things that training can't teach you. This is not like something that you're just going to wake up one day and someone's going to tell you this, right? You're having an identity crisis and you're acting out of this identity that's in conflict with the person you actually want to be. And all of us have to choose every day who we are going to be and act out of that. And one of the easiest ways to keep someone from their identity is to get them to identify with something that is going to take them down. Because if I can get you to identify as something that's less than you are, then I know you're not going to even show up for the fight. You're not going to even get in the game. You're not going to put any money down. You're not going to start because you were defeated to begin with. So that's why I need every single one of you guys to be on during the session tomorrow. I have the flyer right here. And it's called Healing Your Identity and Your Self-Image. So I haven't gotten into self-image yet. Thank y'all for hanging in with me. Your self-image is basically how you feel about what you're capable of accomplishing. So if your identity is off, right, then that usually leads to having a lower self-image. And people typically will perform up to what they believe is they're capable of and what they believe is possible. So that's the other side that you're informed of or that's informing your performance. So one of the things that one of my old clients told me, and it made me feel really good. I said, well, tell me, what is something about my coaching that you feel like has worked? And she says, you know how to make people feel really good about themselves and believe in themselves, which makes me feel good, but it's also very intentional. Because I know if you don't feel good about yourself and your situation, you're not going to do anything because you're defeated. And half of the battle when it comes to coaching people and developing people is making sure they buy into their own potential. Half of my job is helping people to buy into what they can do and what's possible for them. And I know the moment that I can see the moment where they actually buy into it, and I know the actual accomplishment is around the corner. I have someone right now who has literally in the past, I think 3 months, has tripled the number of sales in her business because she now sees that that's possible. And it happened really shortly, as soon as the mindset changed. Now, so once the mindset changes, you can apply the strategy. But you can give someone all the strategy in the world, but if the mindset doesn't change, it never works. So tomorrow we're going to do work and I'm going to give you the how-tos to healing your self-image, meaning improving your self-image, but also healing and restoring your identity. And we're going to figure out, okay, what are the things, how have you identified, and how has this been in conflict with what you actually want and the life that you want to live? Because until those things are congruent, until they're in alignment, you're going to always, like, it's like your destiny and you are always going to pass each other like this. And these are the types of decisions that inform whether or not something's going to take 11 days or 40 years. It's just no one ever explains it. This absolutely is going to inform whether or not it's going to take 11 days or 40 years. And y'all, we don't have another 40 years to be waiting around for a result. I'm in this space right now, like, Lord, I don't have forever today. What do I need to do? Let me apply this right now. Because I don't have 5 years to wait. I don't have 10 years to wait. And I know you have time, but you know that I don't. So let's just get this done. So I hope that you guys do that. If you go to the link in my profile, RSVP, it says healing your identity and your self-image. It has the same thing on there. And it's Saturday, tomorrow, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to jump right into it. So the information is dope. I've gone through another level of healing with the information. I'm going to go back in and I'm doing more and more with this curriculum as soon as we get off of here. And yeah, that's it, y'all. And I really appreciate y'all really sitting in and taking this stuff in. So I will see you guys, and I will see you all tomorrow. Don't hesitate. Don't question. Just do it. The workshop is like 35 bucks. And it's going to be worth 100 times that. So I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.